3 days had crawled by like torture for the crew of Serenity's Grace. The air had grown so thin that every breath felt like drowning, and the radiation was slowly cooking their delicate bodies from the inside. Captain Velnara had given up hope when the proximity alarms suddenly screamed to life, making everyone jump in terror. "What now?" she gasped, thinking their ship was finally falling apart completely. But Helmira was staring at her sensor readings with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Captain, there are ships out there. Big ones. And they're coming straight at us." "Impossible," Velnara whispered. "Nothing can survive in this radiation storm." But the sensors didn't lie. Massive heat signatures were blazing across their screens like tiny suns, moving at speeds that should have ripped any normal spacecraft into atoms. Whatever was coming their way was traveling so fast that the laws of physics seemed to be crying in protest. Then something impossible happened. The ship started slowing down. The lead vessel emerged from the radiation storm like a nightmare made of metal and fury. It was huge, easily 10 times the size of their elegant research ship, and it looked like it had been built by someone who expected the universe to try killing them every single day. Thick armor plates covered every surface, massive engines glowed like angry stars, and weapon turrets sprouted from its hull like the spines of some cosmic predator. This wasn't a ship. This was a flying fortress designed for war. "Dear stars," breathed Engineer Talvek. "What kind of monsters build something like that?" More ships appeared behind the first one, each one as brutal and threatening as their leader. They moved in perfect formation, like a pack of space wolves hunting through the void. Their hulls glowed with heat that would melt Zenthri technology, and electromagnetic energy crackled around them like barely contained lightning. Then the lead ship spoke. "Zenthri vessel, this is the UES Thunderstrike. We received your distress call. Prepare for emergency assistance." The voice that came through their communications system was like nothing the Zenthri had ever heard. It was deep, rough, and powerful, the kind of voice that belonged to a creature that had spent its life fighting impossible battles and winning. Captain Jake Morrison spoke with the casual confidence of someone who treated deadly radiation storms like a minor traffic jam. Velnara's translator was working overtime, but even through the electronic conversion, she could hear something terrifying in that voice. These weren't peaceful explorers or gentle scientists. These were warriors, and their ships proved it. The escort fleet spread out around Serenity's Grace like protective sharks. Each warship was a masterpiece of organized violence, covered in sensors, weapons, and armor thick enough to stop asteroid impacts. They moved through the radiation storm like they owned it, completely ignoring energy levels that were slowly killing the Zenthri. "Who are they?" whispered Helmira, watching the massive ships take position around their dying vessel. Communications officer Nindai was frantically checking his database. "They call themselves humans. I've never heard of this species. But Captain, their ships are generating energy signatures I didn't think were possible. They're not just surviving this radiation storm, they're thriving in it." Through the viewports, the crew could see these human vessels up close now. They weren't sleek or artistic like Zenthri technology. Instead, they looked like they'd been hammered together by beings who expected everything to try killing them and wanted to make sure they could kill it right back. Every surface bristled with weapons, sensors, and repair equipment. These ships were built for one purpose: to go anywhere in the universe and survive whatever they found there. "Zenthri vessel, please respond," came Morrison's voice again. "We're reading critical life support failures on your ship. Our medical team is standing by." Velnara realized her hands were shaking. These creatures had just performed what should have been an impossible rescue, charging through a radiation storm that would kill any civilized species. Their ships were floating weapons of mass destruction, piloted by beings whose voices sounded like controlled thunder. But they were offering help. The beautiful, peaceful Zenthri were about to be saved by the most terrifying saviors in the galaxy, creatures who had somehow turned survival into an art form and built their entire civilization around the simple idea that the universe couldn't kill what refused to die. "This is Captain Velnara," she finally managed to say. We accept your assistance." The monsters had come to save them. The beautiful research ship Serenity's Grace floated like a dying butterfly in the endless darkness of space. Around it, deadly waves of radiation poured from the nearby Gamma Serpentis Nebula, turning this corner of the galaxy into a cosmic graveyard that no sane species would dare enter. Captain Velnara stood on the bridge, her see-through skin glowing faintly in the dim emergency lighting. Her people, the Zenthari, were known throughout the galaxy for their incredible technology and peaceful ways. Their ships could travel between stars in the blink of an eye, and their science had unlocked secrets that other races could only dream about. But right now, none of that mattered. "Captain," whispered Science Officer Helmira, her voice shaking with fear. "The quantum cores are dying. The radiation out there is cooking our systems alive. Our shields weren't built for this kind of punishment." Velnara closed her large, silver eyes and felt her heart sink. The Serenity's Grace had been on a simple mission, studying strange life forms in the outer rim of the galaxy. It was supposed to be routine, safe work for a research vessel. But then their navigation system had malfunctioned, dropping them right into this radiation storm that stretched for light years in every direction. The ship itself was a work of art, sleek curves and shimmering metal that looked more like a sculpture than a spacecraft. Every surface was smooth and perfect, designed by a civilization that had forgotten what true danger felt like. The Zenthari had built their technology for a peaceful universe, where the biggest threat was a minor system glitch or a scheduling conflict. But this wasn't that universe anymore. "How long do we have?" Velnara asked, though she dreaded the answer. Helmira checked her readings again, hoping the numbers had somehow improved. They hadn't. "Our life support is switching to emergency mode. The air recyclers can't handle the radiation damage much longer. Maybe 12 hours before the atmosphere becomes toxic. Maybe less." Around the bridge, other crew members worked frantically at their stations. Engineer Talvek was trying to reroute power from non-essential systems, but every circuit he touched seemed to spark and die. Communications Officer Nindai had been sending distress calls for hours, but the radiation was scrambling their signals. Even if someone heard them, who would be crazy enough to come into this death trap? The Zenthari crew was scared, and they had good reason to be. Their bodies were delicate, evolved on a world with perfect weather and gentle gravity. They had never faced real hardship, never had to fight for survival. Their ancestors had solved war, hunger, and disease thousands of years ago. They were artists, scientists, and philosophers, not warriors or survivors. Should we activate the emergency beacon?" asked Helmira, her voice barely audible. Velnara felt her pride crumble. The emergency beacon was ancient technology, crude radio waves that any primitive species could detect. Using it would be like admitting that their advanced civilization was helpless, that they needed rescue from whoever might be barbaric enough to travel through this cosmic wasteland. But what choice did they have? "Do it," she whispered. The beacon activated with a simple beep that seemed too quiet for such a desperate moment. Now their ship was screaming into the void in the most basic way possible, sending out the same kind of signals that cavemen might use to call for help. As the hours crawled by, the crew watched their beautiful ship slowly die around them. Systems failed one by one, and the air grew thick and stale. The radiation was like invisible fire, burning through their shields and cooking their electronics from the inside. Velnara stared out at the swirling colors of the nebula and wondered if this was how her people would be remembered, as explorers who flew too close to the sun and never made it home. In all their thousands of years of peaceful exploration, they had never imagined they would face something their technology couldn't solve. The distress beacon kept transmitting its simple message, "Help us. Please. Anyone." But in this corner of the galaxy, where radiation storms raged and space itself seemed angry, who could possibly hear them? And even if someone did, what kind of species would be crazy enough to come racing into certain death just to save a bunch of strangers? The Serenity's Grace drifted on through the cosmic storm, and its crew waited to die. Within minutes of the thunderstrike docking with their ship, Chief Engineer Beth Carter was already suiting up for what the Zenthari could only describe as suicide. The radiation levels outside were so intense that their instruments couldn't even measure them properly, they just showed angry red warnings and gave up trying to calculate actual numbers. "Ma'am," Valnara called through the airlock intercom, "you can't go out there. The radiation will kill you in seconds." Beth looked up from checking her equipment and grinned. It was a terrifying expression, all teeth and confidence, like someone who had just been told the odds were impossible and found that hilarious. "Oh, this old storm. Nah, we've seen worse. Remember that binary pulsar job last month, Tommy?" Her partner, Engineer Tommy Rodriguez, was loading a toolbox that looked like it belonged in a medieval torture chamber. Massive wrenches, plasma cutters that glowed with barely contained fire, and devices that seemed to be held together with prayer and determination. "Yeah, that was fun. At least this time we won't get cooked and frozen at the same time." The Zenthari crew watched in absolute horror as these two humans casually stepped outside their ship and into what should have been instant death. Through the viewports, they could see Beth and Tommy floating in the void, completely exposed to radiation levels that would turn Zenthari flesh into soup in heartbeats. But the humans weren't dying. They were working. "Okay, let's see what we've got here," Beth's voice crackled through the comm system as she examined the Zenthari ship's engine core. "Oh wow, your quantum matrix is completely fried. This thing's deader than my grandmother's cat. Good thing we always carry spares." Valnara felt her world spinning. These creatures were treating their most advanced technology like broken household appliances. The quantum matrix had taken her people's greatest scientists decades to perfect, and this human was talking about it like it was a burnt-out light bulb. "Tommy, hand me that flux capacitor," Beth called out, attacking the engine core with what looked like a controlled explosion. Sparks flew everywhere, and energy readings spiked in ways that should have been impossible. "And grab the big hammer. Sometimes you gotta convince these fancy systems to work." The Zenthari engineering team watched in fascination and terror as the humans fixed their ship using what could only be described as organized violence. Where Zenthari technology was all smooth curves and gentle energy flows, human repairs involved hitting things with hammers, welding components together with plasma torches, and somehow making everything work through pure stubbornness. "How are they not dead?" whispered Talvek, watching Beth work with her bare hands in an environment that would cook him alive. The answer came when Captain Morrison invited the Zenthari crew aboard the Thunderstrike for a meal while repairs continued. The human ship was a revelation of barely controlled chaos. Where Zenthari vessels were quiet temples of science and art, this was a roaring machine built for war and survival. The corridors were thick with the smell of oil, metal, and something the humans called coffee, a drink so toxic that their medical scanners screamed warnings just from analyzing the vapor. The walls were covered with pictures of Earth, showing landscapes that looked like alien death worlds, massive storms, erupting volcanoes, frozen wastelands, and creatures with too many teeth. "Home sweet home," Morrison said proudly, pointing to a picture of what looked like a hurricane destroying a city. "That's Florida during storm season. Great fishing weather." When they reached the mess hall, Morrison offered them human rations with the casual hospitality of someone sharing a snack. Captain Valnara looked at the gray paste in the container and politely scanned it with her medical device. The readings made her translator unit make distressed beeping sounds. "This would poison us," she said carefully, not wanting to offend her terrifying saviors. The entire human crew burst into laughter. Not cruel laughter, but the kind of genuine amusement that comes from someone pointing out something obvious and funny. "Yeah, our food's pretty rough," admitted Morrison, wiping tears from his eyes. "Hell, our water would probably dissolve you folks. We keep forgetting that most species didn't evolve in a cosmic blender like we did." Crewman Danny Walsh held up his own ration pack and grinned. "This stuff's mostly synthetic proteins and vitamins. Plus enough preservatives to keep it edible through a nuclear winter. We actually like it this way." "Nuclear winter?" Valnara asked weakly. "Oh, That's when your planet gets hit by so many bombs that the sky catches fire and then everything freezes, explained Morrison casually. Happened to us a few times. Built character. The Zenthari crew realized they weren't just being rescued by another species. They were being saved by creatures who had somehow survived everything the universe could throw at them and decided to ask for seconds. As the repair work continued over the next few hours, Captain Velnara found herself in the Thunderstrike's observation lounge with several human crew members. What started as polite conversation between species quickly turned into the most terrifying history lesson she'd ever received. "So where exactly do you come from?" she asked, genuinely curious about these impossible beings who treated deadly radiation like a summer breeze. Sergeant Kyle Davis pulled up a holographic display of a blue and green world that looked deceptively beautiful from space. "This is Earth, our home planet. Pretty, isn't it?" Velnara nodded, studying the swirling clouds and vast oceans. It looked peaceful enough, though her scanners were picking up some unusual energy readings. "It seems lovely. Very artistic." The humans all started laughing, and Kyle's grin got even wider. "Oh, you haven't seen the best parts yet. Computer, show her the weather systems." Suddenly the peaceful planet transformed into a nightmare of spinning storms, each one large enough to swallow entire Zenthari cities. Massive hurricanes raged across the oceans, while lightning storms lit up the continents like cosmic explosions. "Those little spinning things." Kyle pointed to a hurricane. "Those are just Tuesday afternoons in some parts of the world. Winds fast enough to turn buildings into flying debris. We used to surf in the smaller ones when we were kids." Dr. Rebecca Stone, the ship's medical officer, was casually eating something that looked like it might still be alive. "The atmospheric pressure down there would crush most alien species flat. We grew up in it, so to us it feels light and breezy. Our bones are dense as rocks, and our muscles are basically organic steel cables." Velnara felt her translator working overtime as more impossible facts poured in. "But surely your civilization developed ways to avoid these challenges." "Avoid them?" Corporal Tyler Brooks nearly choked on his drink. "Lady, we turned them into sports. Ever hear of something called football? We basically trained our kids for war by having them slam into each other at full speed while wearing minimal protection. The goal was to grab a ball and run through a wall of people trying to knock your head off. And that was just the gentle stuff," added Kyle. "We had something called rugby where the protective gear was optional. And don't even get me started on hockey, that's where we put knife shoes on people and let them fight over a rubber disc on ice." The medical officer pulled up more data about Earth, and Velnara's eyes went wide. "Your planet is classified as a Class 12 death world. The highest rating in our database. How did you even survive to develop spaceflight?" "Barely," laughed Dr. Stone. "We've been through at least 5 major extinction events. Ice ages that froze the entire planet solid, asteroid impacts that turned the sky to fire, supervolcanoes that blocked out the sun for years, plagues that killed 9 out of 10 people, and somehow we kept bouncing back." Kyle nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, that big crater in the Gulf of Mexico. That's from the rock that killed off the dinosaurs, giant predators with teeth the size of bananas. But some of our ancestors were tiny furry things that survived by hiding underground and eating bugs. When the dust cleared, we crawled out and took over. The best part," added Tyler, "is that our planet kept trying new ways to kill us. Magnetic pole reversals, gamma-ray bursts, climate changes that turned forests into deserts overnight. Every time we adapted, Earth would throw something else at us. It was like the universe's longest, most violent training program." Dr. Stone pulled up images of early human settlements, and Velnara gasped. These weren't the peaceful cities of advanced civilizations, they were fortresses built to withstand constant attack from a world that wanted them dead. "We learned to make tools from rocks, control fire, hunt animals 10 times our size, and build shelters that could survive anything nature threw at us," she explained. "By the time we figured out agriculture, we'd already spent hundreds of thousands of years getting really good at not dying. The funny thing is, Kyle said, we actually got attached to the old death trap. When we finally made it to space, half our colonists got homesick for proper weather, you know, the kind that might kill you if you're not paying attention. Velnara stared at these beings who spoke of planetary catastrophes like fond childhood memories. Her people had spent millennia creating perfect, safe worlds where nothing bad could ever happen. But these humans had grown up in a cosmic torture chamber and somehow turned it into their greatest strength. "You're all completely insane," she whispered. "Yeah," Tyler grinned, "but we're alive. And more importantly, so are you now." That's when it hit her. These weren't primitive brutes, they were the ultimate survivors, forged by a universe that had spent millions of years trying to kill them and only made them stronger. 6 hours later, Serenity's Grace was purring like a contented cat. The humans had not only fixed everything that was broken, but somehow made their systems run better than they ever had before. Chief Engineer Beth had left behind several spare parts and a maintenance manual written in what she cheerfully called idiot-proof instructions for fancy alien tech. As Captain Morrison prepared to escort them back to civilized space, Velnara found herself facing the biggest decision of her career. Her hands trembled as she held the standard first contact report that would be transmitted to the Galactic Council. According to every protocol her people had developed over thousands of years of peaceful exploration, she should classify humanity as a dangerous Deathworld species and recommend immediate quarantine. The evidence was overwhelming. These beings came from a planet that would kill most galactic species in minutes. Their technology was built for war, their culture celebrated violence, and they treated impossible situations like minor inconveniences. By every measure her civilization used, humans were exactly the kind of species that should be avoided at all costs. But they had also risked their lives to save complete strangers. "Captain Morrison," she called through the communication link, "I need to ask you something important." "Shoot," came his casual reply. "What's on your mind?" "My people, we have protocols for first contact situations. I'm supposed to report new species to our governing body, the Galactic Council. They make decisions about which civilizations are safe to interact with." There was a pause, and she could hear quiet conversation in the background. Finally, Morrison's voice came back, and she could hear the grin in it. "Let me guess, we don't exactly fit the profile of a peaceful, civilized species, do we?" Velnara felt heat rise in her translucent cheeks. "Your planet is classified as a Class 12 death world. Your ships are designed for warfare. Your culture includes recreational violence. By every standard we use, you should be considered dangerous." "Well, we are dangerous," Morrison admitted cheerfully. "Hell, our kids play games that would put most aliens in the hospital. Our food could poison half the galaxy, and our idea of a relaxing vacation usually involves activities that could kill us. So yeah, probably not what your council is looking for in terms of friendly neighbors." The communication link fell silent for a long moment. Velnara stared out at the massive human fleet surrounding her ship, these floating fortresses crewed by beings who had turned survival into an art form. She thought about Beth Carter working in lethal radiation like it was a mild annoyance, about Kyle Davis describing planetary catastrophes like favorite family stories, about Morrison himself charging into a radiation storm to save strangers he'd never met. "Captain Morrison," she finally said, "I'm not going to report you as a dangerous species." "Really? You sure about that?" Morrison sounded genuinely surprised. "Our coffee might be a bit strong for your folks. Hell, our water might dissolve you. And that's before we get into our sense of humor." Velnara felt something she hadn't experienced in her centuries of life, the desire to take a risk, to make a choice based on hope rather than fear. "Perhaps our beverages are incompatible, but sometimes the galaxy needs beings who consider the impossible merely inconvenient. We have much to learn from each other." Through her viewscreen, she could see Morrison's face break into that terrifying human expression called a smile. On any other species, showing that many teeth would be a threat display. But somehow, Coming from these impossible survivors, it felt warm and welcoming. "Well, welcome to the neighborhood then," Morrison said. "Fair warning though, we're still working on our table manners. And our diplomats tend to be the crazy ones, even by our standards." As the human fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Velnara made one final transmission to the Galactic Council. Instead of a danger report, she sent a request for formal diplomatic contact with humanity. She recommended them not as a threat to be contained, but as potential allies who might teach the galaxy something it had forgotten, that sometimes the best way to survive an impossible universe was to laugh at it and refuse to give up. The Thunderstrike and her escort fleet disappeared in flashes of brilliant light, leaving Serenity's Grace safely in civilized space. But as Velnara watched them go, she realized that civilized might need a new definition. The humans had shown her that true civilization wasn't about avoiding danger or creating perfect worlds. It was about facing the impossible with courage, helping strangers without expecting reward, and turning survival itself into an act of defiance against an uncaring universe. The galaxy was about to meet its newest neighbors, and nothing would ever be the same.